We were in downtown San Francisco. The streets had been swept. The gates were up. It was pretty clean. And it was Dreamforce, and 45,000 people converged on the city. Mark said some provocative things. He said that Microsoft Copilot is just Clippy. Was he right? What was your takeaways?
Yeah, so first and foremost, the city was clean. It's always nice to have San Francisco at least 4 or 5 blocks safe and clean. And, whether it's Mark Benioff or Xi from China, they really did a good job. Now, I think my max walk was 2 blocks. I don't know what was happening in the Tenderloin, but I never go down there. No, listen, we all knew what the news was on Monday before we even hopped on the plane, because they did their big announcement on Friday. And, in tech, there's always the next new huge thing. And at least for Salesforce, it was agents, right? An offering called Agent Force. There's a lot of forces in the Salesforce product portfolio, services portfolio. And this is literally the next new thing, really positioned as what AI should be. And it's essentially agents is the transaction layer that gets stuff done. It reminded me, it's not the first agent to come out. Microsoft has agents. Google has agents. And if I look at what ServiceNow is trying to do, particularly for the transaction layer, while they're not necessarily calling them agents, it's AI to get stuff done. And as we talked about so many times on the show, AI in the spirit of driving efficiency, increased revenue, and customer stickiness, right? I thought the demos were very compelling. One thing that I found very provocative is that Mark Benioff said, hey, typically, I've got this thing locked 2 weeks out. And he said we were making changes up until the night before. And I was thinking through, what could this possibly be? Well, there was a gigantic Microsoft event that preceded it, and where they were talking about things like Copilot for sales, things like this. And, did this have I have to say yes, Dan, because the shade that Mark was throwing at Microsoft and Copilot, I had never seen that before. I think in our press and analyst Q&A, he threw out expletives maybe 4, maybe 5 times.
They say you're smart if you swear more.
I adopt that philosophy. I'm not saying I'm smarter than most people, but I do the same effing thing. Anyways, you dropped 2 even on the lead in, not using the words, but the shortened,
insinuated,
PG rated ones.
Yeah.
But essentially, he talked about Microsoft Copilot being Clippy. There was also a slide up there that I think it was time to deploy, this gigantic number for Azure AI with one financial services company. So, yeah, I think it did affect it. And my takeaway is that the success of Copilot is either slowing down Salesforce deals or it's making a financial impact. And Dan, I did a little digging on Copilot, and in the last 18 months, and this comes right out of Microsoft, Copilot customers grew 60% quarter over quarter. Number of people who use Copilot daily at work doubled. And then out of their earnings call, 60% of the Fortune 500 use Copilot. Copilot customers increased more than 60% QOQ. And then I think more importantly, if I get in like customer, there's 20, 30 customer stories that talk about the impact of Copilot. And these weren't just across the Copilot for productivity in M365. This was Copilot for sales, for customer service. Companies like Virgin, PG&E, Amgen, Air India, Cognizant, Vodafone, Honeywell, FNB, and also citations on the time it took to implement. And of course, Microsoft is going to put, low implementation days, but 25 days for a specific client to roll it out. So it's great to see the competitive barbs going back and forth, and it's pretty natural. Microsoft has three plays. It has an infrastructure AI play. It has a Dynamics 365 AI play. It has a Copilot that, again, goes across everything, but it has a productivity play. And then with its Copilot, toolkit, you can create your own. And I think this was the main point which Mark was trying to make, which don't DIY your AI. And I think that he has a point on that. It should be easier, should be a lot easier, right? Particularly if you're a Salesforce customer already and you've got your data aligned, you've done the data magic inside of Data Cloud. So I see his point, but it's clear that Microsoft is putting pressure on what he is trying to accomplish. I think my final comment here is on simplicity. I really like the way that Salesforce not only talks and positions on simplicity, even talking about the benefit. I'm an ex-product and product marketing person, so I'm really into it, value proposition templates. And Mark very clearly spelled out what are the challenges that his specific customers are having, the impact that that's causing, what's the widget that he has, and this is Agentforce, that it's using to solve those problems. What was the benefit to the customer, and how is it different, right? Classic product management and product marketing 101, and then a description of how this works. But it's not a bunch of marketing BS. They're one of the few SaaS companies that actually publishes papers on their LLMs, where it shows how it was trained, what data was it trained on, and what were the weightings. So there's real science behind this, not a bunch of marketing BS and stuffed animals like they love to put on stage, which I find incessantly annoying as an industry analyst. But I totally get how they've created this cultish marketing and sales and service operations culture, how people get into this, right? It's like their one show of the year and they're going all in, baby. And they put trailblazers up there. You're in pictures and slides. I get it, but it's annoying. It annoys me.
Oh, yeah. Listen, first and foremost, it was a very interesting inflection. I feel vindicated in a lot of different ways. As we've kind of talked incessantly, Pat, about this AI CapEx boom.
Yeah.
We've kind of continuously gone round and round about where does consumption happen? When do people use AI and how? And so for me, this kind of last second pivot that Mark Benioff had, the change, the all in on Agentforce. We heard Jensen get up and we went to his little roundtable. Agentforce. Jensen was having fun, extra spicy this week. But we have a situation where people are trying to figure out how to get value from AI. And I've said from the very beginning, it's going to happen in software. And not just in software in terms of like the DIY of having a bunch of data scientists and developers building applications using CUDA and writing to GPUs and creating custom, that stuff is happening. But for most businesses, they want the Copilot experience. And this is where the debate's coming in, is Mark's talking about, you can't, it just doesn't work that well. He's talking about hallucinations, data being spilled all over the floor, the graph. And, of course, Microsoft has the most comprehensive graph because it's got such a giant software estate. But what Mark's kind of saying, and what matches some of what we say is that when you're a little tighter, a little narrower, and a little more specific on the data that you use, you tend to get better grounding, better accuracy, better tuning, and better outputs. Now, I'm not saying that this isn't something that Microsoft can do with smaller language models that companies and enterprises can put together using their data and doing it in open Azure services. I think what they're kind of saying is the out of the box, single click kind of experience that everybody wants is still too hard. And so that's the conversation and the debate that we're having. So, I mean, Agentforce.
Hey, Dan, do you think he was talking about that? Because, there's Microsoft Copilot for sales.
Yeah.
Right? It's a specific product that to me competes directly with what he's talking about here.
I think if you want my perspective, because I only know what I think he's thinking, is that he's sort of using Copilot in a universal sense.
Yeah.
Because I think there are Copilots that are more, Copilot for finance is very specific to FP&A, and the data can be walled off and it can be pretty darn accurate. At the same time, when you're using, kind of a Copilot assistant in your productivity tools and it's looking across the entire graph, it can be the content it creates can be pretty off from where you might want it to land on the first pass.
Yeah.
By the way, this is the same problem you're having. I think we're having with all like large language models. It's kind of like search. We talk about prompt engineering. You got to have the know-how to make the most of it. And of course, as these models get better and smarter, it becomes less important how perfectly we script a prompt to get a pretty good answer. And that's why you and I go across different models and we play with it and we see what things come up with. Yeah. And that's going to be some of what's able to be differentiated. But in the end, I think, they're very focused on, the transparency. They're very focused on kind of being a leader in open communications of how they're handling these models, safety, governance. And I think that's the story they're trying to tell. I think it's risky to go after Microsoft. I don't think it's necessarily something that will win out in the long run, but I think what they're kind of trying to say, and this is, I guess, where I'll end this because we could talk about this for hours, is the abstraction layer that I've said for the longest time, whether it was ServiceNow, whether it's going to be using SAP and Oracle, whether it's going to be on Salesforce, whether it's going to be on Microsoft, is people are not going to use AI from 10, 15 different platforms. What they're going to want is their data, their fabric to be universal. So all these enterprise softwares become different database silos. These different silos become the back end, and you're going to have a limited number of front end. So the strategy with Salesforce is the agents are this new front end. So instead of worrying about the SaaS and the application, you go and you build these agents, and a lot of those sort of multi-screen RPA activities that we've been trying to build out for more than a decade can start to work, because now we're taking what the promise of RPA was and we're combining it with neural networks and reinforcement learning. And so instead of being rigid and programmed and unable to be evolved, and Pat, remember when RPA was like a big thing like 5-6 years ago? We were talking about who talks about it? Nobody, because it's an AI-powered intelligent agent has replaced RPA. The specialized RPA companies, the Automation Anywheres, the Blue Sky or whatever they were, Blue Prism, UiPath, they're all sinking right now because you can do all this stuff with agents. So Salesforce is simplifying it. They're putting it into a new abstraction. You get this cool generative AI builder. I spent some time with Clara Shih, the CEO of Salesforce, showed me the demonstration of how this works. Build an agent, build a generative tool. And by the way, Pat, I talked about, and eventually you're able to talk to it and it'll abstract a screen for you. They're starting to get to the point now where you can tell it what you want and it will build it right in front of you to your liking. And that is where I start to see AI being consumed in a really meaningful way.